Every object has a story, but the ones that end up in a junkyard usually have the most interesting and often the most embarrassing final paragraphs. This isn't just a pile of rust. It's a collection of, how on earth did that get here? Moments and monuments to spectacularly bad decisions. We've sifted through the scrap to bring you 49 bizarre, hilarious, and frankly unsettling artifacts that ask more questions than they answer. Forget history books. The real stories are buried under a pile of old tires. 1. Imagine finding a vintage TV set, one of those enormous wood-paneled monstrosities that weighs more than a small car and probably radiates enough heat to cook a meal. You plug it in, expecting nothing, but the screen flickers to life. The twist? It's not static. It's exclusively playing black and white news broadcasts from the 1960s on a loop. It's not just a TV, it's a cursed time portal. You can't change the channel, you can't turn it off. You're just stuck watching reports about the Cold War and ads for cigarettes. It's less a nostalgic find and more of an unsettling electronic ghost. 2. Amidst the rust, you find a massive sign from a long-forgotten 1950s gas station. The bold, optimistic lettering speaks of a bygone era of open roads and cheap fuel. But its neon tubing has been dark for decades. This isn't just a piece of metal. It's a tombstone for a specific slice of the American dream. You can almost picture it glowing proudly on a desert highway, a beacon for weary travelers. Now, its only job is to provide shade for weeds and spiders. It's a powerful symbol of how even the most iconic pieces of our past eventually just become junk. 3. Some toys are small. This was not. It was a giant, oversized wind-up toy robot, the kind that probably stood proudly in an old-timey toy store window. Its gears were worn out from what must have been thousands of windings, but it stood there with a sense of purpose, its painted eyes staring blankly into the distance. It felt like it was just one turn away from coming to life and beginning a very slow, very clumsy rampage through the junkyard. It's a creepy, charming relic from a time when the threat of a robot uprising was much, much cuter. 4. Tucked away between a dead engine and a pile of pipes, someone found an old-fashioned spinning wheel. This was the real deal, an authentic tool used to painstakingly spin wool into thread. In a place filled with the failures of mass production, this quiet wooden artifact was a stark reminder of a time when everything was made by hand. It's a symbol of a slower, more deliberate era, now completely obsolete. It had survived for probably over a century, only to be discarded among things that were designed to break within a year. There's some serious irony in that. 5. You're walking through a junkyard and you see him. A full-size replica of a medieval knight, standing tall in a full suit of armor. This wasn't a cheap plastic Halloween costume. It was intricately detailed metal, sword in hand, looking bizarrely ready for battle. Did a Renaissance fair end in a very dramatic, very final joust? Did a collector's prized possession get tossed out by an angry spouse? Whatever the story, he now stands as the silent, stoic guardian of a kingdom of trash, ready to defend his pile of broken washing machines from any dragons that might appear. 6. It's one thing to find a boat. It's another thing to find a full-size replica of a pirate ship. This meticulously crafted vessel was once the star attraction of an abandoned theme park. Imagine the thousands of kids who once swarmed its decks, pretending to be swashbuckling pirates. After the park went bankrupt, the ship was too massive to move and too expensive to dismantle, so it was left to rot. Now, its tattered sails and peeling paint make it look less like a fun ride and more like a genuine ghost ship, the flagship of a fleet of broken dreams and failed businesses. 7. This find is like the tragic final scene of a Hollywood movie. A forgotten trunk, pried open to reveal a collection of vintage Hollywood costumes from a defunct studio. These weren't just clothes. They were pieces of cinematic history worn by actors in films from the Golden Age. Sequined dresses, tailored suits, and elaborate gowns, now covered in dust and mildew. You have to wonder about the story here. Were they simply forgotten in the chaos of a studio closure, or left behind as a sad symbol of a fading era? Each piece holds a story of glamour, now ending in a pile of junk. 8. Art belongs in a gallery, or so you'd think. But someone found a giant, intricate metal dragon sculpture, slowly rusting in a junkyard. This wasn't some amateur project. It was created by a known artist for a public exhibition. After the show ended, it seems nobody wanted the dragon. Was it too expensive to store? Too weird for a public park? So this magnificent, fearsome beast was discarded. It's a sad commentary on art, where a creature of myth and legend, painstakingly crafted from metal, is ultimately deemed less valuable than the scrap it's now surrounded by. 9. Someone, at some point, felt the need to create a giant wooden spoon. Not just large, but comically oversized, as if carved for a giant to stir a cauldron of stew. Finding it in a junkyard is just baffling. It's too big for any practical use and too specific to be a random sculpture. Was it a prop from a play? A sign for a restaurant? A very literal piece of folk art? Whatever its purpose, it now lies among the debris, a bizarre utensil that raises the very important question, what kind of soup was this thing meant for? 10. There are few better symbols of freedom and adventure than a hot air balloon, which makes finding one in a junkyard especially poignant. The colorful balloon itself was deflated and heaped in a pile of canvas, but the wicker basket stood proudly, almost defiantly, as if it were just waiting for a new pilot and a gust of wind. It's a vessel designed to soar above the world, now grounded forever. It represents a dream of flight and escape, now tangled in weeds and surrounded by the very things people dream of leaving behind. 11. Here's a find that feels like a complete story in one object. A vintage motorcycle with a sidecar. Covered in dust with flat tires and peeling chrome, it still oozed character. You can instantly picture it. A young couple in the 1950s, laughing as they explore some scenic back road. The sidecar, especially, adds a layer of romantic adventure. It wasn't built for speed, it was built for companionship. Now it sits silent, a snapshot of a more leisurely and connected time, waiting for a final ride that will never come. 12. Buried under a pile of debris was a large hand-carved wooden chest. The intricate carvings across its surface weren't just decoration, they seemed to tell stories of sea voyages or mythical beasts. This wasn't a simple storage box. It was a treasure chest built with the kind of craftsmanship that suggests it once held something of immense value. Now, it's empty and discarded. What did it once protect? Gold? Secret documents? Or was the chest itself the real treasure all along? It's a mystery box that will probably never be solved. 13. In the surreal landscape of a junkyard, a giant metal sculpture of a giraffe is about the last thing you'd expect to see. Standing tall and proud, its long neck looming over piles of scrap, this creature was clearly part of some public art installation. It's a whimsical, out-of-place figure in a world of decay. You have to wonder about its journey. How does a 20-foot-tall metal giraffe end up being classified as junk? It stands there, a silent, rusty monument to the fact that sometimes, even art gets thrown away. 14. You hear stories, but you never think you'll see it? A full-size church organ, found gathering dust and cobwebs in an Ohio junkyard. This magnificent instrument, with its rows of keys and massive pipes, was somehow still fully functional. The level of how is just off the charts. How do you even move an organ to a junkyard? Who decides that an instrument capable of filling a cathedral with sound is now trash? It's one of the most baffling and grandiose finds imaginable. A sacred piece of musical history left in a profoundly profane setting. 15. Here's a true relic from the early days of the automobile. A towering gas pump from the 1930s, complete with a visible glass cylinder at the top that showed you the actual gasoline you were buying. This wasn't just a machine. It was a piece of industrial art, a testament to a time when even pumping gas had a certain style. It stood there, forgotten, but largely intact, a silent witness to countless road trips and the birth of American car culture. It's a beautiful piece of history that has somehow outlived its own usefulness. 16. Finding a vintage gramophone among piles of scrap metal is like finding a violin in a war zone. This wasn't a modern record player, it was a classic, with its large brass horn and beautifully crafted wooden cabinet. In surprisingly good condition, it looked as if it could still fill a room with the crackling, warm sound of old records. It's a delicate piece of history, a machine built for bringing joy and music into a home, now surrounded by the harsh, silent reality of broken and discarded machinery. 17. Someone unearthed a full set of antique silverware, and this wasn't the stuff you find at a flea market. Each fork, knife, and spoon was adorned with intricate, elegant patterns, suggesting it belonged to a wealthy family who probably had a butler. Though tarnished with age, the quality was unmistakable. It's the kind of heirloom that gets passed down through generations, which makes you wonder, what happened to the family? This find feels like the final, sad chapter of a long and prosperous story. 18. Yes, you read that correctly. An old, unused section of a roller coaster track. Rusted and covered in weeds, this piece of twisted steel was once part of a ride that thrilled thousands of people at a now-defunct amusement park. You can almost feel the phantom rush of the coaster cars and hear the distant screams of joy and terror. Now it's just a silent, motionless skeleton of fun. A monument to a place where adventure used to live but has long since packed up and left town. 19. This is a find that would make any rock music fan's heart stop. A vintage 1970s drum set, once used by a famous, or at least semi-famous, rock band. Worn and battered from years of touring and now rusty from neglect, it was found in a forgotten storage unit that ended up at auction. The drummer's signature was still faintly visible on one of the cymbals. This wasn't just an instrument. It was a piece of rock and roll history. How it went from a packed stadium to a junkyard is a classic, tragic story of forgotten fame. 20. Buried under a pile of old electronics, someone found a retro pinball machine. And this wasn't just any old game, it was a rare collector's piece from the 80s. The best part? After being plugged in, it miraculously still worked. The flashing lights, the iconic sounds of the flippers and bumpers, it was a fully functional portal back in time. In the silence of the junkyard, the energetic chaos of that machine must have sounded like a message from another, much more fun dimension. 21. Imagine stumbling upon not just one object, but an entire collection of old circus props. We're talking creepy clown masks with fixed peeling smiles, faded trapeze equipment, and other forgotten carnival gear. This wasn't just a pile of junk, it was a complete, ready-to-assemble nightmare. It felt like the aftermath of a haunted carnival that was run out of town. It's the kind of collection that makes you feel like you're being watched, and that you probably shouldn't turn your back on that pile of mannequins. 22. Here's a piece of pure magic, found in the least magical place on Earth. A vintage movie projector, the classic kind with huge reels and a heavy metal casing you'd see in an old cinema. Despite its age and surroundings, it looked like it could still project the masterpieces of Hollywood's golden age onto a dusty wall. Discovering this under a heap of junk is like finding the heart of storytelling in a graveyard of broken things. It's a beautiful reminder of the power of cinema, even when it's left to rust. 23. You can almost smell the nostalgia. A vintage popcorn machine, the old-fashioned kind with a bright red cart and a hand crank to churn the kernels. It was left to rust in a back corner, but its cheerful design was unmistakable. It's a machine built for one purpose, to create simple, pure joy. Finding it in a junkyard feels like a crime. It's a sad, silent monument to movie nights, carnivals, and first dates, now just waiting for its final curtain call. 24. In a landscape of mangled cars, someone found a giant sculpture of a guitar. Made entirely from scrap metal, it was an impressive piece of folk art. The strings were made of thick cable, the body from welded sheets of steel. It was a loving tribute to music, ironically built from the very materials that surrounded it in its final resting place. Was it a failed commission? A passion project? Whatever its story, it was a unique and powerful find, a silent rock anthem played on an instrument of rust. 25. This find is a chorus of silent voices, a whole collection of broken, vintage tube radios, some dating back to the 1920s. Though they were in pieces, their beautiful wooden casings and intricate dials still had a certain charm. It was a graveyard of communication, each radio a portal to a time when families would gather to listen to news and stories from around the world. Now they sit quiet, a collection of forgotten storytellers waiting for a spark that will never come. 26. This felt like opening a time capsule to America's favorite pastime. A complete set of vintage baseball equipment from the 1940s. Old, worn leather mitts, scuffed baseballs with hand-stitched seams, and heavy wooden bats. You could almost hear the crack of the bat and the roar of a long-gone crowd. These objects were once part of the fabric of a community, used in countless games under the summer sun. Now, they're just forgotten relics, buried under the weight of time and progress. 27. There are few symbols of classic Main Street, USA more iconic than the spinning barber pole. Finding one in a junkyard is strange enough. Finding one that is still stubbornly spinning is downright bizarre. Despite being weathered and faded, its red, white, and blue stripes turned endlessly, a hypnotic and slightly insane display of persistence. It was a beacon of grooming and civilized conversation, now offering its services to a clientele of rusty fenders and broken appliances. You have to admire its dedication. It's like a loyal employee who refuses to believe the business has been closed for 40 years, still waiting for the next customer to walk in. 28. This find is just plain epic. Not a piece of a tent, but an entire, intact old circus tent. Though faded and stained by years of exposure, it still stood in a strange, majestic heap, a canvas ghost haunting the junkyard. You could almost feel the phantom energy of the circus it once housed. The roar of the crowd, the smell of popcorn, the thrill of the big top. Now, it's a silent, lonely monument to a bygone era of entertainment. It's a profound symbol of what happens after the show is over and everyone has gone home, leaving the magic to slowly decay. 29. It's one thing to find an old typewriter. It's another to find a collection that once belonged to famous writers. Discovered in a dusty attic hall, these machines weren't just tools. They were conduits for some of the last century's greatest stories. Each key held the ghost of literary genius. But as their famous owners moved on or passed away, these heavy mechanical muses were abandoned. They created immortal words, yet they themselves were treated as disposable. It's the ultimate writer's tragedy, the instruments that built legacies, left to rust alongside forgotten filing cabinets. 30. Hidden behind a screen of overgrown trees, someone found the remains of an abandoned ice skating rink. This wasn't just a puddle. It was a purpose-built rink, now a cold, eerie ruin. Rusted skate rental blades were scattered about, and the old rink equipment was slowly being reclaimed by nature. It was once a place of winter joy, laughter, and clumsy first dates. Now, it's a silent, forgotten stage for a season that ended long ago. It's a chilling reminder that even the happiest places can freeze over and be forgotten when the people leave. 31. Carousels are meant to be symbols of perpetual joy. So finding a lone, full-size carousel horse, detached from its ride, is incredibly poignant. Its paint was faded and chipped, but its elegant, hand-carved form was still visible. It had an air of dignified sadness, as if it remembered the music and the smiling children it once carried in endless, happy circles. Now, it's a permanent resident of the junkyard, a beautiful, static creature whose only remaining ride is a slow, one-way trip to oblivion. It's a truly heartbreaking piece of forgotten amusement. 32. In an era of high-tech composites and precision engineering, finding a set of old wooden skis from the 1930s is like finding a dinosaur bone. Complete with simple leather straps for bindings, these long, elegant planks were built for pure, unadulterated courage. You can just imagine someone in the Alps, wearing a scratchy wool sweater, pointing these things downhill and hoping for the best. They are a beautiful testament to a time when skiing was less of a sport and more of a stylish way to risk your life. How they ended up in a Midwest junkyard is anyone's guess. 33. Amusement parks are full of big, colorful things. But when the park closes, where do they go? Apparently, to the junkyard. Case in point, a giant inflatable dinosaur, found deflated and rolled up in a pathetic heap. This creature once towered over a park, a thrilling attraction for kids. Now, it's just a massive, wrinkled pile of vinyl, looking like a prehistoric beast that suffered a very sudden and undignified extinction event. It's a sad end for a mighty roadside reptile, its thunderous roar replaced by the slow hiss of eternal deflation. 34. Buried behind a mountain of old car parts, a treasure trove of old propaganda posters was unearthed. These weren't just faded ads. They were bold, graphic relics from various wars and political movements. Seeing these powerful, historic images covered in grime and motor oil is a jarring experience. They are echoes of a time of intense national fervor and conflict, now silently decaying next to a broken transmission. It's like history is trying to send one last faded message from the most unexpected and ignored place on Earth. 35. There's something uniquely tragic about a failed holiday display. This giant, deflated, inflatable snowman was once the centerpiece of a grand winter festival. After the event ended, probably due to lack of funds or interest, this titan of seasonal cheer was unceremoniously dumped. It lay there in a massive, sad puddle of vinyl, its painted-on smile now looking like a pained grimace. It's a perfect metaphor for the day after a holiday. All the joy and excitement have seeped out, leaving behind a cold, empty shell and a vague sense of disappointment. 36. This discovery looks like an album cover for a forgotten grunge band. A full drum set, inexplicably covered in a thick blanket of green moss. It was set up as if ready to be played, but nature had clearly become its new drummer. The cymbals were tarnished, the drum heads were warped, but the whole scene was strangely beautiful and haunting. What kind of musician abandons their instrument in the middle of the woods long enough for it to become part of the ecosystem? It's a silent, percussive monument to a song that was never finished. 37. Before everyone had a supercomputer in their pocket, there were these things called telephone booths. Finding one today is rare. Finding one in a junkyard is like finding an artifact from a lost civilization. This classic red booth, complete with the old-school phone still inside, was a relic from a bygone era of communication. It stood there rusting, a silent testament to a time when you needed a pocket full of change and a bit of privacy to make a call. It looked like it had been teleported straight from the 1960s into a scrap heap. 38. Some people customize their cars with spoilers or new rims. The person who owned this car had a different idea. It was a vintage sedan, completely and meticulously wrapped in high-quality leather. The entire exterior. It was a rolling, drivable piece of what can only be described as expensive, questionable art. Of course, leather doesn't hold up well to decades of neglect in a junkyard, so it was cracked and peeling. But even in its decaying state, its sheer, unapologetic weirdness was a thing of beauty. 39. This wasn't just any dollhouse. It was a large, creepily detailed model from a defunct toy shop. The furniture was perfectly crafted, the wallpaper was peeling just so. But there was something unsettling about its realism and age. It felt less like a toy, and more like a miniature haunted house. You have to wonder why it was discarded. Was it a collector's dream that got thrown out by mistake? Or did the tiny, unseen residence finally become too much for the previous owner to handle? Either way, it's a masterpiece of unsettling craftsmanship. 40. There's a special kind of charm to old, small-town amusement park rides. Finding a lone flying teacup ride in a junkyard is a perfect example. With its chipped paint and weathered appearance, it was a far cry from the glossy rides of today. But you could still feel the phantom thrill of spinning in circles until you felt sick. It sat there, a colorful, lonely pot of joy, waiting for one last rider to take a spin. It's a sweet, nostalgic piece of a simpler, more dizzying time. 41. This find is a direct link to a more elegant past. An old, wooden, horse-drawn carriage, the kind you'd see in a Victorian-era film. With its polished wood, ornate details, and plush, rotted seats, it was a vehicle of pure style and class. It had obviously seen better days, but you could still imagine it being pulled by horses down a cobblestone street. To see such a beautiful piece of history, an object of such craftsmanship, left to slowly weather away in a junkyard, is nothing short of a tragedy. 42. A giant metal windmill is an icon of the American landscape. Finding one in a junkyard feels like seeing a fallen giant. This wasn't a modern turbine, it was an old-fashioned ranch windmill, the kind used to pump water for generations. Its blades were bent and its frame was rusted, but its imposing structure still dominated the area. It was a symbol of self-sufficiency and the taming of the frontier, now decommissioned and left among the failures of a more modern age. It's a powerful, rusty relic of a harder, simpler time. 43. Roadside attractions are a special kind of weird Americana. This giant concrete elephant statue was once the proud mascot of some forgotten roadside zoo. Now it stood amidst piles of scrap metal, its painted eyes staring blankly, its concrete skin cracked and stained. The attraction it once advertised is long gone, and the elephant was probably too massive to move. So it remains, a bizarre and lonely monument to a failed business venture and a testament to a time when a giant concrete animal was all you needed to get people to pull over. 44. The space race was full of grand dreams, and this is a relic of one that never took off, a full-size replica of a rocket designed for a space program that was likely canceled and forgotten. It wasn't a small model. It was a massive testament to a forgotten ambition, now lying on its side in the corner of a junkyard. It was built to reach for the stars, a symbol of human ingenuity and aspiration. Its final mission, however, was a slow, horizontal descent into a pile of rust and weeds. 45. Before digital signs, there was neon. This vintage gas station sign was from the golden age of American road trips, its bright neon lights designed to be a beacon in the night. Though now dark and covered in grime, the bold lettering and classic design still screamed 1950s cool. Finding this was like discovering a lost artifact of highway culture. It's a piece of history that once represented adventure and the open road, now just another forgotten light on the road to nowhere. 46. Someone found a giant heavy wooden ship's wheel. This wasn't from a small boat. It was the kind of massive wheel that would have taken real strength to turn, suggesting it came from a large old vessel. It was a symbol of command and adventure on the high seas. How it ended up in a landlocked junkyard is a complete mystery. It sat there, a nostalgic and powerful piece of maritime history, now navigating a sea of scrap metal, its seafaring days long over. 47. Here's a find that's both cheerful and deeply sad. An entire vintage carnival ride, a small swinging chair attraction still attached to its trailer. It looked like it had been driven to the junkyard and then simply abandoned, left to rust in place. It's a complete package of joy, now sitting idle in a scrap heap. You can almost hear the faint echoes of carnival music and happy screams. It's waiting for someone to bring it back to life, but it's more likely just waiting for the crusher. 48. Prepare yourself, because this one is deeply weird. A massive collection of old taxidermy animals. Not one or two, but a whole silent zoo of them. Foxes, birds, and even full-sized deer, all frozen in lifelike poses, now sitting amongst piles of junk. They were once part of a private collection, but now they form a bizarre and eerie scene. It's like a board meeting of the damned, a silent, dusty menagerie that watches you with glassy, unblinking eyes. It's by far one of the creepiest things you could ever expect to find. 49. Halloween decorations are supposed to be temporary, but this one's abandonment feels permanent. An enormous, deflated, inflatable pumpkin, once the star of a theme park's Halloween display. After the holiday, this giant gourd was unceremoniously discarded. It lay in a sad orange heap, a wrinkled caricature of festive fright. It's a fitting end in a way, a symbol of a season of ghosts and ghouls, now a ghost itself, haunting the junkyard with a memory of Halloween's past. And there you have it. 49 relics that prove America's junkyards are the world's weirdest museums. Now it's your turn. Pick one, just one, of the things we found today and tell us its real backstory in the comments below. Don't give us the logical explanation. Give us the crazy one. The story that's probably true. If you enjoy digging through the bizarre, hit that like button. And subscribe, because there's always more weirdness waiting to be uncovered.